At the moment, just a small line I would like to say about our organization, South Asian Forum for Environment. We started in Bhutan itself, and in India we installed us in 2004 itself, continuing there. At the moment we are working in almost all the South Asian countries except Pakistan. For obvious reasons we couldn't take an entry over there, though we are very much willing to work there also. And our flagship program is wetland conservation. In India itself, we are working in 9 Ramsar sites and more than 13 or 14 wetlands pan-India. So before we come into the real discussion forum, a day out in the wetlands, just to cut the discussion short, or to cut short my lecture, I would take the leverage of showing you a small documentary on East Kolkata wetland, which was made by us and published in COP21 in Paris, because we are lobbying for wetlands with UNFCCC, and the impacts will come back later.
আমরা এখানে 30-40 বছর হয়ে গেছে কাজ করছি। রুই মাছ আছে, মৃগেল মাছ আছে, কাতলা মাছ আছে, লাইন টিকা মারা হচ্ছে।
Home to 15 million people, Kolkata is one of the largest cities in India. It sprawls across nearly 2,000 square kilometers around the banks of the Hooghly River. But this intensely urban area still retains many splashes of green. These are the remnants of the vast wet wilderness that once dominated the landscape. Made up of rivers, marshes, floodplains and lakes, the city's wetlands are home to a huge diversity of wildlife. For much of the year, they act like sponge, soaking up excess water. This helps prevent flooding. It's a good example of an ecosystem service, a benefit provided by nature that helps humans to thrive and prosper. In the milieu of climate change, wetlands and their mitigation potentials are significant.
One aspect that we want to look at is the linkage between these urban and peri-urban wetlands and this natural hydrological regime. And this is particularly important in light of climate change, when things like, when hydrological variability is likely to increase, and there'll be more floods and more droughts in the future as a result of climate change.
In the eastern fringe of the city lies the huge and shallow East Kolkata wetland. It is the largest man-made filtering ecosystem in the world, recycling nearly 1 billion liters of sewerage every day. Much of the wetland consists of sewage-fed fish ponds, which help purify the water. The fish they produce, along with small-scale agriculture, provide food and income for over 100,000 families.
জলাশয় আমাদেরকে বাঁচাতেই হবে, না বাঁচালে আমরা আগামী দিনে এই এলাকার মানুষ আর কিছু করে খেতে পারবে না।
Ecosystem services of these wetlands are more substantial for the poor.
Periurban wetlands have got a tremendous importance in the entire urban ecology. People not only earn money from fisheries or from agriculture, but they are culturally linked, ethnically linked to these wetlands.
Horticulture in wetland areas and farming practices near periurban water bodies sustain many livelihoods.
আগে আমাদের এই জায়গাটায় আমাদের এইখানে এরকম জিনিসটা ছিল না, আস্তে আস্তে বিগত দিনে সব চাষের জমিগুলো চলে গিয়ে এখন এই সব বিল্ডিং হচ্ছে। চাষের জমি চলে গেলে এরপরে তো আমাদের মনে ছাড়ার গতি নেই।
If you take a look on the skyline, you will find the urban development is encroaching into the wetlands. This is one problem. On the other side, the community also flouts the rules of conservation.
Periurban wetlands, especially the East Kolkata wetlands, are under threat. They are vanishing fast. As the city encroaches, their ability to provide food, filtration and flood control is compromised.
ঢেরি আমরা আগে করে দেখে আসছি, তো পানা ছিল, পানা তো কাজ করেছি, তারপরে এই ময়লা পড়ছে।
দেখে আসছি ছোট থেকে মাছ চাষ হতো, মাছ চাষ হতো, তারপরে এটা হলো কি জমি হলো, ধান জমি হলো, তারপর ধান জমি হলো, তারপর ধান জমি থেকে থেকে হতে হতে তারপরে এই যে তোমার এইসব নোংরা মোংরা ময়লা এইসবগুলো পড়ছে।
A comprehensive conservation plan is needed that takes into account not just the need to protect biodiversity, but also recognizes the welfare of the wetland communities and the services the wetland provides to the city.
এটা তো ঠিক হচ্ছে না, না এই যে সব এখন এই সব বাড়ি ঘরদোর হচ্ছে, আমাদের তো অসুবিধা, জলাজমি বন্ধ করলে তো আমাদের অসুবিধা আছে, আমরা তো এটাই করে খাচ্ছি।
আমাদের ভেড়ি চড়া হয়ে যাচ্ছে, ভেড়িকে সংস্কার করতে হবে।
When we were talking to fishers and farmers, a very distinct problem that came up is the lack of policy for conservation. As such, we don't even have a national policy for wetland conservation.
A better appreciation of the huge economic benefits the wetland ecosystem services could fetch may tip the balance in the favor of the wetlanders. The biorights approach of South Asian Forum for Environment is one such successful conservation model. It compensates opportunity costs of the commons with payments from ecosystem services.
Ecosystem services that nature provides will have to be protected if it's to be sustainably used. And this is the message that we want to give all those people who are living around the wetland, that not only should they be using it, but they should use it wisely and they should also protect it.
The benefits of urban wetlands speak for themselves. But who will speak for the wetlands?
So I think we just got a brief account of what exactly the wetlands mean. I use this video just to reduce the contact time so that we can get more of interactions, and straight away we come into the problems where we find the wetlands are endangered. The other reason of showing this particular video is basically the point that you can relate very much with Dipayan Bill. Exactly the same scenario is there with East Kolkata wetland. And believe me, when we took the fishers from Dipayan Bill to East Kolkata wetland, we had a exchange program. We took the fishermen from here. There is a cooperative called Panchpara Samabay Samiti. So around 60 fishers, we had taken them to show how this wetlands are operating and how biorights is operating in East Kolkata wetland. And we are replicating the same model over here in Dipayan Bill. So such a similar situation that it's really amazing. So you'd be better able to correlate that what exactly happens to a periurban wetland. And as we are moving towards Habitat 3, last time in Habitat 3, there was a discussion more on the third habitat, that is the periurban habitat. So the cities are growing, the village is trying to enter into the city facilities, and there is a confluence, that is the periurban space, which is not defined, say, sociometrically, which is not defined politically, which is not defined ecologically. And unfortunately, these wetlands are in these periurban spaces. So that is the major threat that the wetlands are having. So with this, we'll straight away come into the problems and some of our interventions I would like to show you just in one slide. Just a list of discussion points, basically. We know that there is a wealth of ecosystem service benefits. Why wetlands are important? Whenever we talk about wetlands, I can quote two such responses from policy people. One is the minister and another is the secretary. One response was, oh, wetlands have got wetlands. So it should have been dry. Then we could have better used the lands there. That is one response. And very recently, the environment minister in West Bengal, he was saying that, look, we are not touching any water body in the wetland. We are just concerned about the land in the wetland. So there, if we can make some malls and some big markets, So this holistic feeling, what was rightly quoted by our director said that it is multidisciplinary. It's so much overlaps are there. Probably that is one reason people have not thought of these ecosystems. They're so supple, so tender, and always in a transition. Transition from land to water, water to land, transition of biodiversity, transition of microclimatic changes, transition of limnological aspects. Wherever you step in, you find that things are changing. So dynamic is the ecosystem. This amazing studies this ecosystem over there, and it's really important to study in the milieu of climate change. That is where I stand, that inadequate attention in the national water sector agenda. We do not have a wetland policy. People have not thought of this wetlands as a natural national resource. And it has impacted by urbanization, population increase, land use changes. We'll come to that point. I will show you how we are getting impacted. And emphasis has been on ecological and limnological studies, but not on climate milieu. Wetlands are the best sequesters for carbon, especially the urban carbon. On the contrary, if you mismanage the wetlands, they will be the biggest emitters. So we'll have to strike a balance if we are talking about climate adaptive smart city modulations, like Guwahati is planning for a C40, say, tag. So it has to take care of its own wetlands. Not only Dipayan Bill, don't say that Dipayan Bill is the Ramsar site. 1,001 wetlands are there all around this entire city. We are also working in Dipayan Bill. The situation is even more worse than Dipayan Bill, because at least people try to save it as a Ramsar site. So the situation is, the scenario is that we do not know what exactly is to be done, and there is a huge knowledge gap that needs to be addressed immediately. Hydrological, landscape, and wetland spatiotemporal changes analysis studies are very sparse. So with this agenda, if we start today's discussion, let us see what exactly is happening next. We are doing a 5-year program with International Water Management Institute on periurban wetlands. And on that, we have got some data collected. This is basically the land use, the land cover changes, 2000 to 2013, almost 13, 14 years. Just have a look on the blue patches. This part, you just compare it with this part. It is ipso facto. You can just understand what exactly is happening. And let me tell you, this part is East Kolkata wetland. This is the river, Hooghly. This red part is the urban encroachment area, the urbanization. Everything I find here, it seems to me as an encroachment. So this part is basically the East Kolkata wetland. See the way it is shrinking. This entire part is vanished. And you know what? Calcutta stands third in the flood risk all over the world, just because of the reason that there was a small river. You can see the left outs over here. This river used to connect River Hooghly with these Calcutta wetlands, and that has vanished because that has been turned into a sewer canal. So naturally what has happened is this entire area is now drying up, and if there is an upsurge in the River Hooghly, and if there is a flood, the entire water is going to enter into Calcutta. Almost 980 million liters of sewer every day, that is going to come into the bedrooms of people. But unless it comes to the bedroom, you can't make them understand that how important these wetlands are. Talk about Dipayan Bill. The data is very, very poor. We couldn't get any particular data. We are developing a data stock. At least now we have 3 to 3.5 years data only. Because I was just discussing with sir that the main problem is, if you have a data on the land cover changes, you do not have a data on the socioeconomic dynamics. If you have data on the socioeconomic dynamics, you do not have the data on the flood resilience, say limnology, the spread of water, the flood levels, So you cannot correlate to enter into a conclusion from where you can plan for conservation and plan for livelihood sustainability. So that becomes the real challenge. And unless there is a systematic, scientific management of data, collection of data, we cannot talk about wetlands till then. And no one is going to put resources for these wastelands, because in everybody's eye, it's good if we can convert this into solid land and spread our urban cities so that we can have a more better space. Another scenario, this is Loktak Lake, the Phoom Bees. I mean, you know much better than me. This is one of the gem that we have in the northeast. Now what has happened is, see, the entire hydro period has changed due to the Ithai barrage. I'm not going into the political debate on the Ithai barrage, but if we talk about the ecological aspect, we need to understand the hydrodynamics of a wetland, that how it is going to be affected. Today, the Phoom Bees have turned out to be a huge problem to the entire Loktak Development Authority. And they are putting bulldozers and big backhoes to clear these Phoom Bees. But why destruct the natural phenomenon, the natural system of a wetland now, rather than conceiving it, perceiving it, understanding it, and planning it beforehand? We could have got the same results without making this Ithai barrage. Today in US, in Europe, even in Middle East and other similar say areas in the world, people are removing barrages and dams to make the natural flow clear. We do need power. We also want to develop. Who doesn't want that? But that doesn't mean that we stick to only one option of making a barrage or a dam, and we never think about putting floating solar hubs on the wetlands. That adds to the values. Now let us compare the values. Why should we then conserve the wetlands? Let us come to the same point where the political people also try to say debate on, and that is money, the resources. If we compare that, look what we have. Intact wetland and intensive farming. See the comparative values. This type of a work we do not have in India. We do not have it in South Asia. We have just proposed one such work with Asia Pacific Network for Global Change Research in Japan. And probably if we get that, we can collaborate on that also. So this type of a study helps us to lobby, helps us to convince people that this is going to add on to the GDP. And then only you can have the policy on the table and the resources allocated for that policy sustainability. So the intact value of wetland is way higher than intensive farming. We always get, bashed on the point that agrarian economies are emitter economies. Our paddy culture is emitting. We should reduce that and purchase paddy from other countries. But to compensate that, if we can keep our wetlands, we can show our carbon balance sheet in a much better way. The global value of ecosystem services of wetlands is $4.9 trillion per year. And how much of wetlands do we have in India? Please believe me, it's nearly 1/5 of the entire land area, including the coastal wetlands. And we do not consider it as a resource. We do not consider those people who live in those wetlands as our citizens. They're the citizens of dirt, you have seen them, ostracized from the entire mainstream. So naturally, when it comes to the conservation, the first peg to bank on for conservation is the people who are living in the wetlands. Without them, we cannot talk about this 4.9 trillion per year. This has been, jointly developed by us and IWMI.
See, this little bit complex though, but then this shows us the gaps that we have. Ecosystem services, we have all the 4 ecosystem services over here. Human well-being and poverty reduction. Now, whenever we work towards conservation, the first thought that comes is how much of livelihood sustainability we can manage out of this. Just talking about conservation and ecosystem restoration doesn't make a sense in this particular, scenario, global scenario, and specifically when we are always trying to put the backdrop as climate change. So, human well-being, now there can be drivers, indirect drivers or the direct drivers. Lot of gap areas are there because of the shortage of data, because of sporadic research focus. There had never been a program on wetland. A lot of projects have been done. So consistency of data leads us nowhere. And finally, what comes up is the lack of local institutions. When we talk about the community who are conserving the wetlands or working in the wetlands, you won't find any structuring of the local institutions. So that was the first thing that we wanted to do in East Kolkata wetland. We developed an institutional system, a fiscal conservation model, that conservation and money should be the 2 sides of the same coin. And when we talk money, people get interested. Fine. Let us convert the payments of environmental services into some fiscal model where it can compensate the opportunity cost of a common man. So a fisher, if I say you conserve the wetland, he has to incur some opportunity costs. How do we compensate that? So that was the biorights model, and what we found is, say East Kolkata wetland, this is again I'm telling you the same scenario we have observed in Dipayan Bill also. If you just remove East Kolkata wetland and put Dipayan Bill, this model stands equivalent and equipotential. So we find that there are unregistered cooperatives, clusters of people who are working, unorganized, and there are few registered cooperatives. Either they exist or they have gone defunct, but they have a paper of registration. So that is the validity of the institutions at the local level. Now, conservation is one focus, and they use the ecosystem services, but these ecosystem services directly add on to the GDP. Because ecosystem services, if you convert it in terms of fiscal parameters, definitely it is sustaining livelihood, it is returning the revenues from that, and people are surviving on those ecosystem services. So naturally what comes is, if we can develop a model where we can compensate the opportunity cost, people will conserve the ecosystem services, in the sense they will rather sustainably intensify the ecosystem services, which adds on to the GDP, which adds on to the sustainability of the livelihood of people, and they feel good in taking up conservation models. So, coming straight to some of the examples that what we wanted to do. East Kolkata wetland, as I said, 980 million liters of sewer being dumped every day. Around 5,000 metric tons of solid waste being dumped every day. The innovation was, can we think of ecotourism in the garbage dumping yards? That was a great idea. And when we placed it in the platter, people said that, whoa, what nonsense is this? Tourism in garbage dumping yards. And it worked. Now, why it worked? Because we could collect the data that 4 months, November, December, January and February is the lean season for fishing. They don't do fishing that time. And during this period, they don't get the earnings also. Now, this is the period when we have the vacations and we want to go out for winter, for a vacation, for tour, for a day out. So we tried to make a win-win situation that if we can develop some sort of an ecotourism, people can come, understand what exactly it is. It's an international wetland site.
it's a Ramsar site, and can pay money to the people. From this particular earning, we kept aside 20% for their micro insurance coverage. That is risk spreading. And the rest, we said that fine, you compensate yourself. If you are left out with something, develop the habitat, disallow plastics, conserve the wetlands. Now, when they started doing that, naturally they're compensated now. So they started doing that. The habitat started becoming better. The birds came back. More were the number of tourists coming in, viewers to see the birds. So now the wheel started spinning. And there was again a point where they said that we should then only focus on tourism. Forget about fishing. It's giving us money. That is very critical. There we need your support. Where to stop and where to start, that needs to be scientifically decided. So this is how the model started working. We got endorsed by the 4th TEEB report of UNEP that this is a best practice model. We could save East Kolkata wetland from getting delisted from the Ramsar list. Liu Yang came and, things were fine. So now it was time to replicate. And we thought, why not Dipayan Bill? The problem in Dipayan Bill was people were fighting for fishing rights. The forests do not listen to communities. Communities do not listen to the forests. If you go to the forest, they do not have data. They will not entertain you. If you go to the communities, they will say, first you tell me you will give me fishing right or not. If you give me fishing right, I'm going to talk to you, else move out. Rather, kick out. So we entered in between, sandwiched in between. The first query was, why you want fishing rights? Because that is our livelihood. Fine. If I stand by you to fight for the fishing rights, we cannot do it like a magic. It needs time. But this time, how will you sustain your livelihood? Do you have options? No. Fine. Are you ready to take trainings on this? This will give you money. Dipayan Bill is just a water body. You have 1,001 such water bodies around. Why don't you find out the ecosystem services there itself? What we did? A geospatial mapping, a resource mapping, a need assessment survey, and a livelihood vulnerability indexing. So after the LVI and the NASH and all those, geospatial things we put into a platform, geospatial platform, we could instantly make out that if we develop these bills or these ponds, give them training, and focus on integrated aquafarming, their livelihood is saved. They will start believing us. And it happened like that. People in Dorabil, they are doing pen culture. When Dorabil is a place, many of you must be knowing, but then just a small introduction. It's a connector of Dipayan Bill and the rivers. So Dorabil is a place where when the flood water comes, the rainwater comes, it's like a bill. Otherwise, it's a grazing ground. Land rights disputed. People say this is mine, government say this is mine. The channels, the drainage network, all clogged with plastics. That is the scenario. Lot of ponds are there around Dorabil. We said that you use it as cages. Go for commercial carps. Bring this commercial carp into pen in the floodwaters. Manage the floodwater ecology. Hardly 1.5 years training. They're happy. And now we are standing by them. We are talking to the forests that include them, rejuvenate the eco-development boards, bring the community on the platform, on the table. Things are happening. Things are moving. But urbanization moves faster than everything. So the big problem is the garbage. The bigger problem is the lichet. The most important problem is if you dig down the soil of Dipayan Bill, first 5 centimeters, 6 centimeters is all plastic. Just a core sampling if you do. Go beyond that, it is silt and mud. Beyond that, it's almost like black carbon. So much of carbon is arrested there that that particular soil can even be used as fuel. And Dr. Sir was telling that at times they roll it on a stick and then they light it up. Now the conservation delayed. What can be done right now? Remove the plastics and release the emission from the carbon? Keep the plastics and ban the elephants to come in? Very difficult. So where to start and where to end? How to do it? How to plan the conservation? It needs an enormous scientific intervention in it. And there I think we need your help and support. Another example, Sundarbans, World Heritage Site. Inundation is a natural phenomenon, seawater coming in, sea level rising, people getting migrated, losing their agricultural lands. A small intervention, we converted these agricultural lands into alga culture fields. Algae, natural algae. And it flourished. We had given them certain models. They took it up. Algae is coming up now as a food, as a feed, as fodder, as fuel, as fertilizer. At least some revenue they are earning from the area, from the field, where the ecosystem services had been disrupted by sea level rise. This is what we plan to say, or we like to say, as sustainable intensification of the ecosystems. The coastal habitats are conserved in that way. Bhitorkonika Ramsar site number 1205, another example, same problem. The forest and the communities. Bhitorkonika Ramsar site is so well preserved that even an ant needs a permit to enter into it. Beautiful forests. Come out of that, 60 villages. Forget about poverty line. Poverty line is much, much higher above their head. There are families who keep their young ones, infants, wrapped with hay and clay to keep them warm. That's the level of poverty they have. 1999, when super cyclone B3 had hit, 10,000 people were instantaneously dead on the villages. 47 villages washed off. And they stay there because they do not have any other place to go. If they move from there, they will be termed as environmental refugees. What we said is, find out ponds that you have. Every rice field is now getting converted into prawn cultivation, ponds. Huge amount of external investment is there. Prawns are being cultivated and deliberately saline water is being pumped into these rice fields to cultivate prawn. The local people in search of livelihood are working there as casual laborers. And per month, the investor is making a net profit of somewhere around 6 to 7 lakhs per month from prawn cultivation. The people who work there as casual laborers get $300 per day. That's it. After 5 years, we know Andhra has failed. Andhra is now weeping. After 5 years, this Bhitorkonika, the entire, Kendrapara district, is going to be non-productive. No rice, no soil left, non-saline, to get some food. We said you preserve your ponds. Forget about those big profits. Preserve your prawns. Catch the small crabs that come in with the tide water and try to cage them, feed them with 30% protein feed, grow them in half time, and sell them to the market. Can you do that? It clicked. So these trays are basically those cages, and small kids, they run and play, they catch the crabs, crablings rather, and then they bring them. They are they are treated with some treatment so that they do not have any viral infection on the body, fed with a balanced diet, and then when it comes up, the entire thing is being sold with an almost equivalent profit with prawn cultivation. Villages are changing. The ladies have come up. What benefit we had as environmental organization? Ponds are now very important for them. Coastal wetlands are now very important for them. We went for 5,000 saplings of mangroves we planted. Across 1 week, we did that. So resilience is developing. And they're saying now if the ponds, if the storm comes, at least we have something to bank on. Majuli. Focus is on Majuli now. Everyone in Assam is talking about Majuli. So we thought we should also say something about Majuli. We had got a call from NABARD that if you can do some intervention in Majuli, whatsoever it is. We want a board. Sorry to say this. We want a board written NABARD. We said, fine, we'll do it. So we wanted to see what exactly it is. What is the flood scenario? How much is getting inundated? What's the planning of the government? And we found that, again, the same scenario, no data, no understanding, no hazard zonation of the areas, no inundation maps, nothing of the kind. We started banking on the traditional ecological knowledges of missing people. We developed a data bank. Then we had a very small, we do not have funds to manage big labs, so we have a very small R&D section. So we thought of making a platform where we can develop floating rafts. And on these floating rafts, we are growing vegetables, some creepers. In between the floating rafts, we are putting, pens for fish cultivation. And as the floodwater comes, it raises up automatically. When the floodwater goes off, it gets down. Over this is not soil. This is coco pit and vermicompost with a special mixture ratio which supports the seedlings. So now they themselves have converted this as seed banks. They're saying that when the floodwater moves out, we need seedlings of rice. So we don't have time. So why don't we make these into seed banks? I said, fine. So seedlings are now being raised on this. So this is how the community also enters into the conservation model. And they understand that this is the right now they have because they have been empowered with the conservation system. Another buzzword these days is circular economy. Resource conservation, sustainable consumption and sustainable production, sustainable lifestyle. Who better knows than the poor people how to sustain, how to be sustainable in their lifestyle? We are not. What was lacking is the area where we want to bring them, want to mainstream them. One is the climate preparedness and adaptive community farming, collective farming. We are developing water banks. One water body is your bank. You put your water in that. You take the water as you take money from the bank, pay the, interest, or it is your right on the water. You sell your right and get it compensated to conserve water. So that sort of models we are trying to plan with resource utilization through payments from environmental services for poverty alleviation. Financial inclusion and risk coverage. Kishan credit card, 40% is a big figure now in the villages. 40% endorsement for KCC. We are trying to convert it into 100%, bringing them under some community microinsurance coverages. At least they should have something to fall back when they are victimized by environmental risk and disasters.
gender equity and women empowerment, just not to say this, that we also do gender equity and women empowerment. What we are finding is when women are taking the lead, they are meticulously working. The tenacity of purpose is more in the women, fortunately or unfortunately, whatsoever you say. But it is there. So once they take a lead, they do it for their kids. We don't think that much as the moms think. And naturally things come to a success point. And once it comes to a success point, the other part of the gender, they say, oh, money is coming. Come on, we also do it. Fine. Anyway, what works is right, what doesn't work is wrong. That's the only theory that we have in the development sector. So now after mainstreaming, we are looking into the carbon markets, carbon banks, carbon financing, REDD+, REDD, PES, all these things are falling in place. Actually, these are all buzzwords. What is happening in the ground zero is whether you can survive or you are not there. There is nothing in between. We very colloquially, when we talk to people, we use a phrase. Allow me to use that. When a lady is pregnant, either she is pregnant or she is not. There cannot be something in between. Survival is a question like that. Either you survive or you do not. Something in between means somewhere there is a mistake. Somewhere there is a flaw in the conception level. So when in Bhitorkonika, in Kendrapara, when we were working, the entire dynamics of the socio-political, scenario, it was very farcical. That's the worst hit area in India for cyclones, and they do not have any cyclone data. They do not have any disaster mitigation plan in a geospatial platform where you can see at a glance that what are the areas where the disaster risk is more or risk is less. If we were 50 years back, I'd have taken it to be granted that fine, we do not have the technology. Today we cannot say that. That means somewhere these storms, floods, droughts have turned into national festivals. And there we need to bang on that, come on, we have science with us. We can still decide. You want profit, you take it, but not at the cost of people's life and livelihood. That is one reason that has brought me from the academia to the development sector. That is one reason that gives me a pleasure to work in ground zero. So just a model to churn the discussion that we are eagerly waiting for. This is a flip-close model. Disaster aversion and poverty alleviation. These are the two verticals moving away from each other. If you want to bring them together, what you have is the higher you go on this axis, increase in the disaster risk. Longer you come on this axis, poverty increases. So if you want to merge this, there will be two important things, that is risk governance and another is resource convergence. This resource convergence is what we talk about sustainable development. But parallelly, in South Globe, we need to have risk governance where we need technology incubation and cost-effective transfer of the technology. Today we are saying zero till for mitigating, say, drought. But what is the cost of zero till technology to a farmer? What is the incubation period for that? So foster this, we can have a better risk governance and disaster aversion, say, matrix will fall in place with poverty alleviation. So more you come to this midline, the red line, you close the flap, more of sustainability you get, and that comes through participatory action research. We call it participatory because it's not me, not you, not the community, not the policy, but all of us together. It should be equal,
and reciprocal. We call it action research because you have to come out of this room and see in the field what exactly is the scenario in ground zero. And we call it research because this entire decision support system needs to be based on scientific analysis, needs to be based on technological interventions, and at the same time, it should be logical, economically, viable economically. So that is how participatory action research can close this flap and help us move towards a sustainable development. This is true for the South Globe, may not be true for the first categories of countries. We give a damn to that. We are concerned about ourselves. Let us frame ourselves in a way that we need not depend on the decisions taken in COPs. Rather, we be proud of decisions being taken here by the communities, by the local people, that yes, Dipayan Bill is important for me. Thank you very much.